Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Something to Wrestle With.
Bruce Prichard. Well, you know.
Well, man, we're talking about a pretty deep subject. Yesterday was a big anniversary. It was the anniversary of the first SmackDown after 9/11. And we put this on a poll a lot in the very early days of Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. And for whatever reason, maybe people just didn't think the timing was good, or they just didn't want to hear the story and sort of have to dig up some of these weird memories. But we felt it was time, so we're going to cover it. It's the SmackDown from September 13th, 2001. Of course, that's 2 days removed from perhaps the darkest day in the history of the United States. Of course, we all remember the terrorist attack that happened in the World Trade Center in New York. And then, of course, there were other incidents in the Pentagon and even one in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 folks here were killed. So as all of that's going on a Tuesday, you guys are planning a show for SmackDown in Houston, Texas, your hometown. Man, what a weird time to go back and think about. Where were you when you first heard about the attacks? Were you in the office? Were you with the guys? What were people thinking?
Well, full disclosure here, I tried to go back and watch the show and I couldn't. This is going to be a tough one for me because there are just so many emotions running through my head and just going back and reliving that time. We were in Houston. We had a show the night before. Monday Night Raw came from San Antonio, Texas, and we had come up to Houston. We were staying at the Hilton out on the Southwest Freeway, which was a departure from where we normally stayed. And we were at the Summit, the old Summit. It was the Compact Center at that time. But it was business as usual on a Tuesday morning. Get up and head to Vince McMahon's room and go over the show, start rewriting and taking a look at the show for that night, and, work as usual. And I was watching NBC, the Today Show in my room. In Houston, the NBC feed for the Today Show is basically an hour delayed. And I noticed that they had gone live and that there was a live graphic on the screen. And I'm thinking, what the hell's going on? I just gotten out of the shower and I'm watching this, and they talked about a plane, and they actually said that they thought it was a commuter plane that had run into the World Trade Center. I thought, damn, that's bizarre and not good. But they're talking about it, and they've got live coverage of it. And Vince's room was across the hall and probably 3 doors down. So I was ready, and it was probably about 15 minutes before we were all getting ready to meet. And I went down to his room, and he had a suite. And one thing you never do for these meetings and in the hotel, you never have the TV on. That just, Vince didn't want any noise, any distractions or anything. And I remember going in, the door was open. I turned the TV on, and Vince came out and says, "What are you watching?" And I said, "That's New York City." And he says, "Oh yeah, what's going on?" I said, "Yeah, a plane flew into the World Trade Center." He said, "Damn, what the hell?" Some small plane, some guy learning to fly. We thought, nobody really knew. And Vince and I are standing there in his room watching this, as all of a sudden you're watching that live shot and a second plane flies into the other tower. I remember looking at each other going, holy shit. And the first thing out of our mouths was, we're being attacked. It just was so surreal. So holy shit, that doesn't happen, and you're thinking, you've seen the movies. In my head, this is how fucked up I am. In my head, there was a movie, Die Hard, one of those Die Hard movies at the airport, where the guy changed the readings on planes so that people thought they were like 500 feet higher than they actually were, so they would crash into the runways. And I'm thinking, oh my God, someone has gotten into the towers and is sending these planes into the World Trade Center. What the hell is going on? But all of a sudden, you just got this sick feeling in our gut that was, holy shit, that this is not good. And still, even at that point, we didn't know that they were major airliners, big planes. We had no idea. I don't think anybody did at that point.
You know, I'm a redneck from Alabama, so I never had. Had you been to the World Trade Center before? Would you have had a reason to have been there for any meetings with Vince or anything else?
No, I had been to them before when I first went to New York. You know, everybody goes to the World Trade Center. Everybody goes to the Empire State Building. They were monuments to New York City. So, you know, I had been in them before, but it was just such a staple of that New York City skyline. And it was something that you could never really conceive. I don't think that, especially at this point, and everybody starts showing up for the meeting, and we're watching this damn thing. And you've got Brian Gewirtz, who lived in New York.
Right. You
got Paul Heyman, who Paul didn't live in New York City, but Paul's from New York, and most everybody up there, our offices our center is Connecticut. It's the Northeast. And this is happening 40 minutes from our home, and no one knows what the hell's going on. So, immediately everybody's on their phone, and I'm calling home. My wife and kids are at home, and I'm calling to make sure that they're okay and try to, you know, reassure them from thousands of miles away that, hey, everything's going to be okay. Just stay close and keep me informed. And then you start thinking about, you know, who do you know there? And this is before all the crazy shit even, as if two planes crashing into the New York Trade Center isn't crazy shit. It was all really just so surreal, and it started playing out almost in slow motion. So you add to that for me, and I look at it, and that's why I say this is going to be a tough one for me from a very emotional and personal standpoint. That day on September 11th, 2001, we were in Houston, and my friend Jim McInvale from Gallery Furniture had arranged. My wife had recently been diagnosed with cancer, and every hospital we had gone to in the Northeast, and it basically told us she had 4 years to live maximum. This is it. And Max has come on down to MD Anderson in Houston, and he had arranged for me to meet with the president of the hospital that day. I called him and I said, Mac, all this stuff going on. And Mac didn't even know about what was going on in New York at that time. And he says, hold on. And he went and looked at the TVs in his stores. And he says, hey, we're still going. MD Anderson, it's the hospital. They got a lot of sick people there. They're not closing for anybody. So I'm going to meet you there. You need to take care of your family. So in the middle of all this, I've got a meeting with the folks at MD Anderson to bring in my wife's records and have them look at her file and so on and so forth. And we're all watching at this point. We're just sitting around watching the news. And an anecdote, okay, this is, I guess a lighthearted kind of moment that takes place in all of this chaos and tragedy. Paul Heyman is on the phone. Paul's on the phone with his dad. And Paul is giving us updates. As now we're watching the news, but Paul would say, there's another plane that is heading towards the Pentagon, or they've attacked the Pentagon now. And 20, 30 seconds later on the TV, the report would be, it appears that the Pentagon has had a plane crash into it. So Paul was ahead 20, 30 seconds of whoever he's talking to, his dad on the other end of the phone. And basically New York was getting those live updates a lot sooner than we were. We were getting delayed a little bit on the network delay. And we jokingly said, well, Paul's dad is talking to the president and getting all these updates directly because he's, by God, Mr. Heyman. And so if there was any levity in all of that tragedy, it was Paul giving us Heyman-like updates throughout this whole thing. And it was, as everything kind of developed, you kept thinking, okay, they've flown 2 planes into New York City. They've flown a plane into the Pentagon. What's next? What else is going to happen?
I do want to know, like, you guys, obviously everybody's here for the meeting and they're all sort of scrambling, making calls. In that moment, is Vince still trying to be the leader and trying to not really sell it? Or is everybody just sort of like, and nobody really knows what to do?
At that point, nobody knows what the hell, what to do. At that point, everyone was checking on their own, their relatives, their people in the vicinity. And, Vince was doing the same thing. Vince was making sure that Linda's safe, and he's making sure that, anybody that they've got in New York, that everybody's safe, and, get everyone together, and we need to figure out what the hell's going on. But nobody knew what was going on. It took whatever, an hour or so before we realized, holy shit, all of these different things are taking place, and it's happening live before your very eyes, and you're witnessing it. And they're showing the World Trade Centers, and they're talking about there's things being thrown out. You can see debris falling from the World Trade Centers. And then all of a sudden they realize that was people jumping. And then when the towers came crumbling down, it takes your breath away. And the last thing on anybody's mind is, well, hey, we got a show tonight. What are we going to do? But at the same time, you've got a major event in a major metropolis that's taking place that night. So you got to put on your professional hat, and you've got decisions to be made. So I remember, because I had the relationship with Mike McGee and Jeff Gaines over at the Compact Center, calling them, and they're saying, hey, we're assessing the situation, but the city is under an emergency, whatever, I forget how they worded it, but emergency protocol or whatever the hell it was. He goes, we're probably not having a show tonight, guys. We are going to secure the building, and we're getting everybody out of here. It's like, okay. There were guys that were in transit from San Antonio, and just different people that maybe they didn't, weren't watching the news. They were driving and listening to music or what have you, that are probably going to be showing up during the day. And they said, we'll have security here to inform them, but you guys need to get a hold of people. It was crazy. And in the middle of it, I've got to go to the hospital with Mattress Mac to deal with the personal situation. So I stayed as long as I could. I remember watching the buildings crumble and thinking, sometimes you think, is this the end of the world? Is this the end? You don't know. and I had to go, man. I had to go to the hospital, basically. And I took a taxi over to the hospital.
When you leave the room, are you like hugging everybody? I mean, this is a time when America really came together and people weren't really sure what was next. And it does feel like everybody sort of paused for a minute.
I remember Vince. I remember Vince being very, go take care. To him, it was take care of your family. You need to go and do this and take care of this. We're going to make it through this. I do remember hugging Vince. I remember being in Vince's bedroom on the phone, apart from the suite. He came in and was like, "You need to go and take care of what you need to take care of." And yeah, it was scary. But you had, there's a part of you that has to move forward and continue to do whatever it is you can do to be normal in whatever normal is at that time. People just didn't know. And that was the scariest thing about it all. A lot of speculation. And I think that for the news media, they were careful, as to what the hell they said. And so it was an unknown. All we knew is, man, planes were being crashed into spots in America, which had never been happened before.
So I guess we should give everybody an update. Your wife that you're talking about was told, she had 4 years left to live. She's still with us today, all these years later. So it was good to have the hookup from Master Smack, was it not?
Man, it was, I'll never forget going in, and Mac introduced me to the president of MD Anderson there at the hospital. And I thanked him and thought that, okay, now I'm going to meet with whoever I'm going to meet. And Jim McInvale is an extraordinary human being. He said, I thanked him, and he goes, the president thanked him, and it says, "Hey, Jim, I'll call you." He goes, "Well, I'm not going anywhere. My friend's wife is sick. I'm going to stay here as long as it takes until you guys figure out what we're going to do to make her right again." All this shit's going down. He's got his businesses to run, and he's got everything going on his end. And he stayed with me at that hospital until they got the head of the lymphoma clinic to look at my wife's films and look at everything, call me. And I'll never forget his words to me. He says, "We can't remove it. There's too much of it. It's going to grow forever." He goes, "But we can sure as hell slow it down, and your wife will have a normal life and allow us to treat that. And we're going to slow it down enough that she's going to be fine." So through all this chaos, that was the stuff that just kind of hit me the hardest, was them telling me, "Nah, man, we can slow this shit down and she's going to be fine." And all these years later, 17 years later, she's fine. And knock on wood, right now she's in remission and good.